cross-domain or not. So in the first case, you're going from x.com to auth.com. The request will be stripped, so there will be no authentication credentials left there. You will log in the website auth.com. This is all within the same domain of your authentication service provider. Then you will be redirected to x.com again. This one will be stripped, but the URL will include a token and also a URL to jump to. And that's the next step. That is within the same domain, but still within the normal operation of CsFire, this will be stripped because it's cross-domain going from auth.com as the originator from the redirect to x.com. So we have to solve this solution in order to be operatable in a single sign-on context. So we actually modified, and within redirect chains we also take into account the different steps of the redirect. So in the case of CsFire, we will also accept the last one going from x.com to x.com. This works well in a single sign-on solution, but you will also see that the interaction between auth.com and x.com is also stripped. So if you have to jump back to the original session that you had in the beginning of the whole scenario, then there will be a problem because that information will be stripped. In authentication context, it will not happen that often, but think about the payment context. You're going to a web shop, you're buying some things in your shopping basket, and then you're redirected to a payment service. At that moment, when you're actually providing all your credentials, you're actually paying, and you're redirected back to your original website. You want to recover from a previous session. So we still need to figure out how we can deal with that. And the current implementation that is available, we will strip, but we have now a plan to actually incorporate previous redirect chains as well. So if you saw the reverse redirect chain before going to your payment service to your external service, we will take that information into account as well in order to make the decision. We're still working on a proof to make sure that we actually have a sound rule there, that the information of previous chains can be reused. And especially we are thinking about open redirectors. We have to make sure that open redirectors are not opening gates here in C-serve attacks. Another technical issue we had to think of when implementing CsFire was the fact that browsers are very forgiving in the way you actually are handling host names and also IP addresses. One of the things that we saw is that you have different ways to encode IP addresses, and the moment we are making our decision, we didn't do a lookup yet where this is an IP address or a host name. We're just getting a string from FireFox. So we had to make sure that the interpretation of IP addresses was done correctly in order to make sure that we can differentiate between different domains. If you want more information on the way on obfuscating cool IP addresses, you probably all know of them, but you can look into that URL as well. Another important thing is the way we actually were making a more graceful protection of HTTP authentication. In most other extensions, if they are handling HTTP authentication, they're actually stripping information with the first request, and they are not allowing the end user to re-enable or to re-enter their credentials. As a side effect, in other extensions you will not be able to visit HTTP authenticated websites that are cross-domain. We wanted to have a more fine-grained solution where you actually also could contact cross-domain websites. We'll allow that the HTTP authentication is stripped by using the privacy mode of FireFox in the first request going to the server, but then we ask the end user for new credentials if he wants to actually allow that request going to that particular domain. In order to allow that, we had to fix a bug within Mozilla. We reported that under the number given here, and in the new Gecko, actually this problem is resolved, and CsFire in combination with Firefox 4.0 also protects well in an HTTP authentication case. Concerning CORS, we currently have no explicit support for CORS in our CsFire. So it means if you have a pre-flight in CORS, we get some advice from the server, we will ignore that advice and executing our policy. In the future, we could think of actually allowing that advice to have an impact on the policy itself, because that information comes from the server. But at this point, we are not decided yet if we may trust the service in providing the information for CORS. We didn't see that much service yet using CORS, but if they are very permissive, allowing everything, I don't think we should actually follow the advice of the server. So that's something that we still have to follow up. So as part of the evaluation, I would also like to show you a few things about the plugin itself, and let me switch to a FireFox instance running here on my machine. You will see the only interaction that the end user will actually have with the CsFire plugin is the small logo at the bottom side of the page. So you see here with the green logo of CsFire that CsFire is enabled. With the right click you can easily disable the policy as well. If for particular websites you don't want that CsFire is actually active or intercepting a request, you can simply disable it. If you're looking to the preference panel, you will see I'm running still an older version of Firefox, namely 3.6. So it's the older version of Hecko. It's automatically detected that HTTP authentication headers are not well protected here. I also discussed that we have a remote server that is actually providing server policies. So these are a few of the server policies that are provided by CsFire by default. But you will also see that you can provide local policy. For example, those two websites need to interact with each other. So you can easily add your own new rules. It's very fine-grained, and we'll think also to provide two ways: a very fine-grained way of adding rules to the policy, but also a more simply way of saying those two websites are allowed to interact. You can also see in the log for every of the requests what's happening actually within the CsFire plugin. And you can also, if you have problems in visiting certain websites, you can start recording it, data record here you can inspect. And if you say, well, this is important to fix in an upcoming release, you can just send the information to us and we will actually process your request as well. So that's actually also a way of getting more input for remote policies so that we can check ourselves on that particular website. So coming back to the presentation, let me finally conclude my presentation. We had a small introduction to CSRF, but more important, we also analyzed some traffic to identify what patterns reoccur in cross-domain traffic. Based on that information and practical experience with end users, we try to find a good solution, a good balance between security and usability. We want it to be secure by default, but we want it to be user independent, but also it has to be applicable in a Web 2.0 context. We implemented our solution as a Firefox extension with the technical evaluation, and also have a real-life evaluation with test users and also the Mozilla community. I've inserted some references, and I would like you to invite to download CsFire, to test it out, and provide us with additional feedback. Thank you.
Any questions?
Could you explain a little bit more about your remote policies and how the remote policies work?
So the remote policies at this point are provided by a single policy server. You could actually define your own different policy server, and the policy server themselves will provide policies that are actually adaptations to the default policy of CsFire. So you could actually say whenever those domains are cooperating with a certain method, having a certain cookie involved, you need to allow this one or you need to deny this one.
And how does that work? Do you have to manually synchronize it? Is it automatically
It will be
handled for
automatically synchronized every 24 hours or whatever you put in your preference pane.
Okay.
So if you're looking to the preference pane for the remote policies, you can choose whether it should be daily or weekly or whatever. You could also just delete the update server and then no remote policies are actually included within your version.
Okay.
So there's some freedom there. We're thinking more of the concept of AdBlock Plus, for example, where you can choose different remote servers providing you policies, and you are in control which policy server is used.
And are you doing anything to protect those updates so people don't insert policies for you?
This is over HTTPS. It's the policy server that is used there will actually be the policy server that your browser can connect to. So from our extension, we're just making a SQL connection to that particular website. And from our side, the information provided there is static information. So we actually upload our information on a regular basis on a static website. That's
Okay.
the process now.
Okay, so the only thing protecting it is the HTTPS. It only
Indeed.
lives across HTTPS, and so as long as it's a valid signature for
Indeed.
that domain. Okay.
Because if we want to be more protective there, we're also restricting other policy servers. We don't want to push that only all policy server is the one that you can use. That's the reason. And also we don't want to push our policy server to users, so users can easily say we don't want to have additional updates there. But if a user wants to experiment with the policies, I would recommend to start with local policies before setting up your own policy server.
Have you considered signing those policies
Not
at all?
yet, but that
Okay.
might be an interesting idea as well.
I would recommend that.
Yeah. Also, our extension at the moment is not signed, but we're in the process at university to sign the extension as well.
How do you handle emails with, right here.
Yeah, okay.
How do you handle emails with URLs with parameters in them?
So at this point, we're only looking HTTP, so browser-to-browser information, website to website. From Chrome, we have special policies that are more permissive in allowing that. From an email, we actually say we don't know any domain information, so typically we will block them. You will actually be locked out of that domain. But that's something that should be able to be configured as well in the near future. So, but everything coming from a mail, whatever, is a specific origin, and we depend on the origin available within Firefox.
One other question about the remote policies. Could you bring that back up again? I was just curious about the list. So these are all the in the research that you guys did with your couple thousand websites. These are all the ones that you found.
Yeah. So this is
the sites that broke.
So this is actually based on reports of the 60 test users that were using it during a few weeks. They actually provide us feedback. At this moment, they're somewhat permissive in the sense that Google, with the top-level domain that Marai is allowed. So whenever you actually could register Google in a different domain, in a different TLD, this could be a vulnerability or an attack scenario for our plugin. But for us, it's very hard to actually get that information. So we made a few assumptions there where those websites. But as you will see, it's mainly the top-level companies like Facebook, like Google, like Yahoo, MSN Live, that all need to be able to communicate within their different domains. And for a few websites that are more specific, for example, for Twitter, we actually checked for Facebook and sharing, for Twitter sharing, because we don't want to log out the user at that point when he's sharing, whether those actual URLs were having a token-based approach. So both Facebook, both Twitter actually had CSRF protection on the server side, and that's for us also a reason to include it in the remote policies.
And can I see the bottom half as well?
So you will see these are test scenarios because we need to provide test scenarios of attackers to actually get our extension logged in. And these are actually all things that were provided by end users that we try to verify whether there was CSRF protection at the server side.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess that's it. In about 10 minutes, the lightning talks will start. So see you then.